We are 5 weeks into the metagame of Into the Inklands, and this week there are no big tournaments to report on, but we honestly ended up having so many events around the world of at least 25 to 50 players. Generally speaking, I think it's enough data and enough information to share some of the winning decks from those, really spread out the love, and showcase all of the wonderful stores that are supporting Disney Lorcana, gearing up for set champs, really getting out there and supporting your locals and understanding that, they are really just paying forward for all that is to come in Disney Lorcana. Lots to talk about today. Not that many decks, but let's take a look at the breakdown. The best decks for week 5 Into the Inklands meta breakdown. As you can see here, Ruby Amethyst is coming in with 17, Amber Steel with 11, Ruby Sapphire with 9, Ruby Amber with 7, Amethyst Steel with 4, Sapphire Steel with 4, Emerald Amethyst with 3, and Emerald Steel with 1. Everybody seemed to like the new gradient graph, so we upgraded it. We're going to be moving forward with this. I hope you guys do enjoy it. It does look nice. It does look how it's coming out. What I am going to start saying is that we are getting to a point in the metagame where this is nice to understand what ink combinations are still being played and still being successful. We are absolutely getting to a point where there are huge differences in choices being made within these ink combinations. Is Ruby Amethyst still supporting Queen's Castles? Is there no locations? Is there still gyms in decks? Are the Ruby Sapphires deck playing Mixed Ducks Manners? The Amber Ruby decks, are they Lantern decks, Pluto decks, Heart of Atlantis decks? There's a lot of different iterations going on here, and even coming out of Amethyst Steel, are there Jafar decks? Are they control decks? Are they aggro decks? So we're definitely getting to finally see other variations of ink combination, potential coming through in these more recent weeks, which I think is very interesting to see. It's very difficult for me to cover and, specifically outline each and every one of those, but I do want everyone to understand that I'm very well aware that these ink combinations are just the broad scope of what to expect. And there has definitely been some true evolution in ink combination deck list more recently. So let's get into them. Our Amber Steel list today is played by Keith Fenneman. He is the runner-up of the 1K from Encounter Comics and Games in Allentown, PA. This list found its way into a solid top 8, and then all the way into the finals, losing to the one and only Rob Serpay. So it's safe to say that this list is definitely really contending with some of the best in the greater Philadelphia area. From talking with him, he has made the decision to really approach this deck in a more aggressive mindset because he does not want to play grindy games with opponents. He doesn't want to put himself in a position to where he can make even more mistakes in the late game. He's definitely more interested in playing the pedal to the metal version and utilizing cards like Bare Necessities to keep his opponent off of Grab Your Swords and Be Prepareds. All in all, Keith played really well this day, picking up a second place finish in a 31-person 1K with some of the best players in the greater Philadelphia area. It definitely a huge accomplishment. Shout out to you, sir. Ruby Sapphire is back at it again this week, finishing in third with 9 top 8s across all the different reported events. And this event comes all the way from the Circuit des Princess, which was hosted at the Gods Arena, which was 32 players, which is awesome. You can see here that this list just keeps evolving. A few weeks ago, we did not have any Lucky Dimes. Now we have Lucky Dimes. We were all in on potential multiple lists with multiple locations of Mixed Ducks Manners and Montanuis. Now we're just down to 2 simple Montanuis. The idea that we have Fishbone Quill and the Heart of Tafiti is really pressuring this concept of being all in with your ramp and really trying to utilize as many resources as possible moving throughout the game. What I do really enjoy about this list is that it is very much a one jump ahead list. This deck loves being able to play a Popsicle on 1 jump on 2, and then play a High Rim on 3, and just really start pressuring the game from there and that point forward. but it also has these other play lines that allows for like a turn 4 Gaston or a turn 4 Medusa or Lady Tremaine, potential turn 5 Scars. This really does pressure the game in so many different ways. Adding Judy to the mix, kind of remembering now, like, hey, listen, we need answers to opposing Lucky Dimes. Even potentially turning off players' spell books, of course. Definitely finding a versatile role within the metagame. All in all, I think this list is continuously evolving over the next few weeks. It's been evolving for a few weeks now. We've seen it come out and be successful on more than one occasion in multiple layers of events. So a huge shout out to this player and being totally successful in another 32-person tournament. Clockwork Games hosted a 1K this weekend down in Texas. This player was able to finish in the top 4 with his Amber Ruby modified deck. This is another deck that over the last few weeks, we've been seeing more and more versions of it. Now, this list is leaning on Pluto rather than playing Lanterns. We have a full 60-card character list. No Lanterns, no Teeth and Ambition, just none of it. We're not interested in any of those play lines whatsoever. We have the evasive packages with Minnie Mouse Surfers and Pongos. We also have, of course, the Mauis, the Chernobog, 3 Hydra in this list, which is really, really interesting. This is definitely a list that over the last couple weeks, since SCG Philly, where I felt like it kind of had a coming out party, we've seen more and more versions of this list become successful. And now you're seeing a week where you had 7 of these in top 8s in all different places, all over across the globe and across the world. And I think that's a really interesting note, is that people are really starting to catch on to this as a potential deck and a potential threat to the metagame. Its matchup against Amethyst Ruby is very good. Its matchup against Ruby Sapphire is definitely winnable. So, when you start looking at some of those top tier decks of what players are bringing to tables, looking for this rogue-esque deck in the format definitely has a ton of potential, and you might continue to see this deck be modified and grow based on the metagame that it's being played within. A huge shout out to our friend Melissa. She was able to go to a top 4 at PAX East in Boston, Massachusetts this weekend. Lizard Kitty is a friend. She's also basically a rival of mine. In every event that we have played in together, we have been able to find our way getting matched up in the middle of the tournaments. So it is really great to see her be successful and pick up a top 4 victory at a 1K. This was a bit of a hassle because PAX East badge was quite expensive, so the players weren't that high in numbers. We only had 25 players registered. Unfortunately, with that type of badge cost and with the low EV of the prize cost, you don't really get that many players invested in tournaments like that. But, good on Melissa for getting in there, playing in the tournament, continuing to be successful with Ruby Amethyst. A week prior, she actually won an Enchanted tournament, picking up an Elsa with a list that was very similar to this one. She's been consistently modifying this deck ever since SCG Philly, and I really wanted to give her a huge shout out. This is another list that over the course of time, we have consistently seen these choices being made. 2 Lady Tremaine and 2 Medusa. We're no longer on 4-0. We are understanding that both of these cards can have a potential place in the metagame, and while choosing one over the other, giving yourself the option is of what every control player wants. If you can simply get away with playing Medusa to get rid of a card, awesome. But if you can get rid of the same character utilizing Lady Tremaine and then adding 2 lore to the board as an additional threat, that is also a really great play line. Understanding that Queen's Castle has its place as well in certain matchups, and the fact that it's inkable means you can kind of get rid of it whenever you want. This list is also sporting 2 Yzma, 2 Maleficent, 1 Dragonfire as well. So there is so much versatility and choice within threats of removal from this particular list that it really is just, hey, what are my best options in every single game? How do I utilize the resources and the tools that I put in my deck as effectively as possible? So again, huge shout out to Melissa. Congratulations on your top 4 finish at PAX East, and definitely looking to see what more damage you can do moving forward. Hey guys, for those of you that do not know, I'm actually a father of 2 that are both on the spectrum. And this coming May, we just registered and signed up for a 5K walk for the Eagles Autism Foundation. It's a really, really great foundation. Everything I've done with this to this point to work with them, to understand everything they're doing for the community and children, and honestly, people of all ages on the spectrum is completely wonderful. All I'm asking is if you guys are interested, you can donate to our team, which is the Penny Pack. All of that will be in the pinned comment below. It'll also be in the description. Anyone that donates, you mean the world to me. Thank you so much, and really helping us towards everything that these people, kids, adults, honestly, anyone on the spectrum might need from this particular foundation. Thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoy the rest of the video. It feels like every other week, Sapphire Steel is a true roller coaster. This deck was able to pick up a win at the Quibbles Case Tournament. I believe this tournament hosted 40 players, which is a wonderful amount, a really nice amount of players for a case tournament. We're not even talking about cash here. We're just playing for boxes, which is really great. Ian was able to pick up the win. And really, this is a deck that for the last couple weeks, I've been saying it seems to be very successful online, but not very successful in paper tournaments. So this past weekend, with really no reported online events, we have seen a decrease in blue steel success within the metagame. Only having 4 successful top 8s for Sapphire Steel this weekend across the world in paper tournaments is telling me that there is something that's being lost in connection with this list from online play to paper play. Whether it takes too long to win, whether it's too many decision points, I can't honestly begin to figure it out. I would really love to know in the comments how you guys feel about Sapphire Steel and in paper tournaments. Are you having success with it? Are you seeing players bring it to their locals and be unsuccessful? I can't really figure out why this deck packs so much punch online and is always successful in these online tournaments, but for whatever reason simply cannot correlate to the paper tournament scene. A few weeks ago, the addition of Lucky Dime really brought this deck to a whole other level. The ability to consistently control the game through cards like Tinkerbell, Let It Go, Grab Your Swords, remarkable amount of draw power from Hiram and A Whole New World, the protection of Cogsworth, the inevitable threat of Tamatoa. This deck really has finally found its missing piece, which I believe is Lucky Dime. I think the hardest thing for this deck for so very long was just not being able to win other than through the means of inevitability. Lucky Dime specifically increases your odds and your timeline in every single game it's played. So many cards being able to come in, realistically replace themselves, or put another threat into play is the reason why Lucky Dime can end up being so successful within this list. Having a card like Cogsworth that can just sit in play, give a resist 1 aura to all of your characters, but be a 2 lore character with ward means that if they don't have an answer to Lucky Dime, they might not have an answer to Cogsworth because he's way harder to deal with. You can just consistently gain the 2 lore, and they just might not be able to prevent that or stop that. But having cards like Gaston come into play, find a card to replace himself, and then Lucky Dime give you 3 lore immediately, forcing your opponent to answer Gaston. If not, the very next turn you get to gain 6 lore. This list really was missing Lucky Dime. It was really great to see that card being a staple in this list moving forward, more than likely. The Amethyst Steel deck, once again, comes in looking so very different. Last week, we covered 2 of the more aggressive and budget versions of this list. Leading up to that, we had seen mostly successful Jafar decks, and here we are now with a very straightforward mid-range control deck that is not utilizing Jafar in any single manner. We are just a blue fairy value deck, and it's hard to argue that this isn't just the correct way to play this deck. While I think Jafar really does put your opponent in a ton of bad positions, making them choose between good plays and bad plays by removing your characters when they don't need to, is really stressful for opponents. But sometimes at high level, your opponent just makes the right play, and then you can't punish them because your deck didn't cooperate. This list entirely removes all of that and goes back to its core of just being a very good blue fairy value deck. Understanding that every card in this deck from 4 up, aside from Rabbit, is a Floodborn character. When it comes into play, it does something. It also additionally does other things like be incredibly powerful, like Robin Hood, like Beast, like Tinkerbell, all those cards doing remarkable things. The one thing that does interest me the most about this list is Fox. I think that this deck in particular, the amount of times you want to use Fox is so very low. And I understand that Madam Mim Fox is one of the most prolific characters in the game, and it really can control the tempo of it so very well. But this deck is not designed to really put characters back into its hand early and then utilize them for ink like Ruby Amethyst does. So you're really having to pick up crucial characters that are important to your overall play style in most cases. So while I like the idea that Madam and Fox is still one of the most powerful cards in the game, I would almost be willing to attempt to just play Rafiki instead. Double Spellbook in this list is just the overall commitment to the bit. This does look like a deck that is a very, very grindy list that is spending a lot of time answering a lot of what your opponent's doing and then not pressuring the game well enough. So having double the Sorcerer's Spellbook and then 4 Queen's Castles is really telling me that, hey, in those super grindy matchups, I'm going to punish my opponents that do not have answers for my locations, that do not have answers for my items. And with that, I'm just going to win the game 1, 2, 3 lore at a time, utilizing these cards to the best of my ability. Shout out to Red Saber Games for hosting their 1K, and a huge success here by Steel Amethyst picking up the win at this particular tournament. The lone Emerald Steel list on today's meta report also came from the Red Saber Games 1K. Emerald Steel seems like the deck that everyone cannot stand playing against, but in the same very sentence has found difficulty in having overall success within the Into the Inklands metagame. While this deck has some of the most threatening cards in the game, specifically Ursula, Deceiver of All, and even potentially Beast Relentless, and of course the one and only Bucky, which might be the most scary character of them all, this list just seemed to be on the side of inconsistency. It's very rare that we see the deck truly succeed over and over again. And because of that, it's been hard to really gauge on the power level of this deck within Disney Lorcana. While I think that every single card in this deck is a really remarkable card and all has merit. This looks like a perfect 60 list for this deck and most likely the metagame that he was playing within. This deck did finish in top 4 of the Red Saber games. I do wonder if they lost the matchup to the Amethyst Steel list that we just presented to you guys. But all in all, I'm really starting to question why or how we should be respecting this deck within the metagame. Let me know in the comments if you're an Emerald Steel enjoyer, if you're having success with it still, or if you're seeing it fall off within your local metagame. This weekend hosted so many tournaments. It's actually insane to really kind of bring them all together, but we did have a tournament down in Florida. George was still traveling for the weekend. He picked up a top 4 playing Ruby Amethyst, but the players next to him are all great players. I've heard all great things from so many of the people in the area. Shout out to Natalie picking up her first top 4 as well. I really loved hearing that this event was so very successful, and a huge shout out to Manny for hosting it. This past weekend, we hosted a 1K with Encounter Comics and Games. All of the entirety of the tournament is actually on our Twitch channel. So if you want to check that out, our Twitch is in the description below. You can go and watch all of the tournament. This event, in all honesty, guys, was filled with some of the best players in Disney Lorcana. Rob Serpay, Curtis Spice, Dick Burns, Ryan Miles, Ryan McKinney, Braden. Like, the list goes on of having these successful players that have been showing up to STGs, showing up to local 1Ks and 2Ks, and just crushing it. So this was really filled with some of the better players in competitive Lorcana so far. So if you want to look at that, you want to check those out, you should definitely go and check the Twitch. A lot of really great games. I also spent a lot of time in between rounds discussing my feelings on the Disney Lorcana Challenge sellout. So if you're looking for that, that might be a good way to find it too. But all in all, huge shout out to Encounter. It was a great event to be played. 31 players, played out pretty smoothly, played out pretty fast. And even after they got into the top 8, the top 8 players wanted to split. And Keith wanted to kind of still play. So he offered up the winner of the top 8 to get a box just so they would continue to play. So they still split the cash, which was nice for everybody, but then they played for a box, and eventually Rob did end up winning said box. Shout out to the team. It was great. This was the first time I was able to give Rob and Kurt their jerseys. It was great to be able to spend the day with everybody, have the chats, really enjoy everything that's going on. Huge shout out to the Twitch family. Really loving us that day. There was a lot of new subs and followers. I think it was over 100 followers in a day, which was amazing. So huge thank you for everyone that participated in that. It was a really, really fun day. So here we are, another week with Ruby Amethyst on top. And I know that I said in week 1, I didn't think this was going to continue to happen. What I find most interesting right now, and I'm really considering doing like an entire video on this, or doing maybe as a podcast topic. So you guys are gonna have to let me know in the comments below. But there really clearly is now a metagame and a winner's metagame. And what I mean by that is that if your only goal is to get into a top 8, and that's kind of it, you're not really worried about winning in top 8, you just want to get into the top 8 so you can say, oh, hey, I made top 8, then I think Ruby Amethyst is going to always be the best choice. I think by the data, by the play skill, by the consistency factor, by the idea that you have like a 50-50 matchup into just about everything, even when you're on the play or the draw, it just really adds a lot of layers to giving players the most opportunity to be successful in small tournaments. And in all honesty, even some of the bigger tournaments, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking any credit away from that either. But that winner's metagame is starting to shape up to be a little bit differently. We're seeing Ruby Sapphire win tournaments. We're seeing Amethyst Steel win tournaments. We're seeing Sapphire Steel win tournaments. Amber Steel win tournaments. So while those decks may not be as good into the overall field, they do feel like they are some of the better decks for the most part in the winner's metagame. If you want me to go over that more, let me know in the comments, and I'll probably try and work on an entire topic for it within the next podcast. But I'd love to hear you guys' feelings of why players are still committed this much into Ruby Amethyst, why we're still seeing success of it. Are players a little scared to transfer to other lists, to try, test their skills in other ways? What I can say locally is that a lot of players locally have been swapping off Ruby Amethyst and really playing other decks to get the reps in to kind of better themselves as a player in Disney Lorcana, which I can always respect. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. It's definitely a shorter one. Bunch of smaller tournaments today to report on. Nothing crazy, nothing big, no dramatic tournament experience. But I really love showcasing all of the different stores that have been supporting this game. It's really great. I'm loving the success. I'm loving hearing about 25, 35, 45, 50-person tournaments all over the world. Our game is growing. And it's growing so much that, this past weekend, 512 people purchased a ticket to the first Disney Lorcana Challenge in less than 55 seconds. Yep, that's crazy. It's insane. I know people are upset about it. I get it. Hopefully in due time, we get some more answers and more feedback, trying to understand how Ravensburger and Pro Play Games are going to make these a little more accessible is the best way I can say. If you've not heard any of the interviews with George, we have had him on the channel now 3, maybe 4 times. I'll put some of the videos here, maybe in the link in the descriptions below. But if you really don't know who George Machado is, I promise you, we have had the most experience with him. George is a wonderful person. I've known him for years, dating all the way back to the Transformers trading card game. I'm very excited that PPG did end up being the ones to host these tournaments. I feel absolute certainty that they are going to knock it out of the park, and these tournaments are going to be wonderful for all participants. And even if you're not in the main event, I have a lot of feeling that PPG is going to make it so you feel the necessary needs to go regardless, to play in these side events, to play and participate in other things that might be going on in the area. I just think that it's going to be a wonderful time. And I know a lot of people are upset about not getting a ticket, but in all honesty, it might be worth it to try and go to these anyway. You never know what could happen on site. For all we know, 100 people might not show up, and you might be there to claim that opportunity. So for me to you, if I did not get a ticket, I promise you I would have been there anyway. That's just how I am. I would have not have missed the first one in Atlanta. There's no chance I would have missed it. I would have gone no matter what. I look forward to seeing so many people. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be really, really fun. You know, a whole weekend of Lorcana on the biggest event, on the biggest stage, in the biggest paper tournament, and honestly, the biggest tournament to date ever will be hosted on that weekend in Atlanta and in France. And it's going to be 1,000+ competitive players across the globe playing for incredible prizes. And I cannot wait to be a part of it. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will see you in the next one.